is Basic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
It took a couple revisions back and forth. The program was fine, getting the documentation right and yet have them be happy with it was a little frustrating, but managed to get it done.
This is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Jaeger released one program for the Atari computers, Space War, which was published by Atari Program Exchange. It appeared in the fall 1983 APX catalog. I will read its entry in the catalog to you. Space War by Jaeger, recommended for ages 6 and up, written in assembly language. 2-player galactic shootout. The galaxy can't live in peace until you vanquish the enemy spaceship that threatens to dominate the solar system. You maneuver around the sun using gravitational waves to propel your rocket fighter into an advantageous position. But watch out, because the enemy lurks, waiting for you to become a prisoner of the sun's gravity and a sitting duck for his Mark II photon torpedoes. Can you survive? The game is a modern adaptation of the arcade-style game developed in 1962, Space War. You pilot your fighter through the solar system with your Atari joystick controller, using the flashing sun at the center of the screen to slingshot you through the galaxy and to avoid your opponent's torpedoes. The only way that your enemy can destroy your ship is by scoring a direct hit with their missiles. You fight back by using your joystick button to release return volleys. The sun has no destructive effect on the rockets. The two players can vary the effect of the gravity, changing it from a pull to a push, and vary the perimeters so the rockets either wrap around or bounce off the edges. You can vary the speed of play and set a score limit of 10 to 21 points, or no limit, or play in the practice mode. The author invites written comments and questions. Review comments. This is a very slick adaptation of an early 60s mainframe computer game, with several new options worked in. Requires one Atari joystick controller. Ordering information. It was available on cassette, which required 16K of RAM, or diskette, which required 24K of RAM. Either way, it cost $24.95. It was APX Catalog 20224. This interview took place on March 16th, 2016. So where should we start? Tell me the story before the beginning, how you got interested in computers, your first experience with computers, and how you saw the Atari, and kind of get me started, please.
Sure. Well, it goes way back. When I was in middle school, a guy from 3M Corporation was making the rounds, introducing people to computer concepts, students, kids. And he came to our middle school, and he had two computers with him. One was in a 19-inch rack, so 6 feet tall. And that computer, he said, was a decimal computer. It did its arithmetic in decimal. I suspect it was really binary coded decimal, but decimal nonetheless. And I don't remember for sure what he called that computer, but I think it was probably Big 10. And then he had a desktop computer, and I don't remember if that was a commercial one or a prototype of some sort. I just don't remember what it looked like. Mm-hmm. But he called that one Little Binary Joe, LBJ, because LBJ was president at the time. And he had kids up on the stage with flip cards, 0 and 1, and he was doing binary arithmetic and whatnot. And a friend of mine at the time thought, gee, that's really interesting. That computer isn't very big. Maybe we could build one. Well, building one was way out of our range, but he did get some schematics from the guy on what are called flip-flops. And we built a few of those, got the parts, some of them from Hamilton Hall in Milwaukee, and we got a telephone dial from AT&T for free and bought some of the other parts and built a few flip-flops. And that got me interested in electronics, and that turned into a lifelong interest in electronics and in computers. Well, fast forward 3-4 years, this guy shows up again during my senior year of high school at our high school. Same guy. I think his name was Doug Kinney, if I remember right. And he has in tow a teletype to dial into a time-sharing service and a little desktop computer. and he teaches us the basic programming language. And so I don't remember, it was like 2-3 days. That was our math class, as we learned how to program computers. I mean, for 1968, that's, pretty amazing. The school thought to do that, and 3M thought to do that, and all of that. Then later that fall, we became aware that the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee campus in Milwaukee was offering to teach Computer Science 132, which was Fortran programming, to high school students one night a week. You'd go for 3-4 hours, and then you had computer time and whatnot. And I and 2 friends went down and took that class and enjoyed it. I think actually there were 3 or 4 from our high school, but our particular car had 3 of us, and learned Fortran and got really hooked on computers at that point, to the point where I used up every last second of computer time I could during Christmas break. I drove down and did Fortran programs just for the fun of it. So then when it came time to enroll in college, I ended up here at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and they have a program called SOAR, which is essentially a freshman introduction where they get students signed up for classes. And my major was electrical engineering. That was what I was going to do, was design and build computers. But I also took computer science classes, and I took my first computer science class then as a freshman. So I did all of that through school. And of course, during school you get exposed to one degree or another to computer games and whatnot, which I also did. So that's how I got interested in computers at the beginning. Then once I graduated, shortly after I graduated, I bought and built an Altair 8800 like many people, and did not run Microsoft Basic. I couldn't afford it. But was interested in computer games. The university at that point had some dial-up capability to dial into computers that were connected to the ARPANET. So things that were from the internet started to show up, and one of those was the original Colossal Cave adventure game. Mm-hmm. So everybody got addicted to playing that. So that got everybody interested in computer games. And at the same time this was going on, video games started to appear. You had the first one I remember was Breakout and Space Invaders, and that was pretty neat stuff, and Missile Command and all of those. And some of those, of course, were Atari. And then also making the rounds at that point was Space War, which had a sun in the middle and 2 spaceships that you could fly in the gravity well of the sun and shoot at each other and get points for hitting the other guy. Well, the Altair wasn't very good at computer games. I had a video card that was made by Processor Technology called the VDM, and there were some primitive character-based action, but they were animated, but still done by drawn characters on the screen. You could shoot down UFOs and whatnot, and it was fun, but it wasn't graphic. Then some friends of mine got Apple IIs, and they actually had graphics, and I was jealous. I had my Altair, and it was fun and useful for things and whatnot, but no graphics. Well, not too long after that, Radio Shack came out with their color computer, and I suppose about the same time Atari came out with the 400 and 800. But I went and got a color computer and played around with it a little bit, but its graphics were pretty limited, and trying to write games for it was impossible. And I wondered about these little Atari computer things that I saw in stores. And I'm like, they're probably just toys like the Atari 2600 primitive. I'm not interested, yada, yada. Well, one day I was at the computer store in town. It was called Magic Lantern. And they had an Atari 800 set up playing, what was it? It was Star Raiders.
Star Raiders, yeah.
Yeah. And holy cow. That was a coin-op quality game on this desktop machine.
It's always Star Raiders in these stories.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was
Yeah.
amazing. And that prompted, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think at least a half a dozen of us from work in our at this point, I was working in my career in IT. There were at least 6 of us out of like maybe 70 people in the IT department that went out and got Atari 800s and played Star Raiders and whatnot. Well, that was great, but I also wanted to learn how to program the thing. So I went and got the technical manual for it and learned how to program it. And it's like, okay, fine, now I know how to do this. What should I do? Well, if I remember right, about that time, Compute Magazine ran an article on the history of Space War. And it turned out that started out on the PDP-1 at MIT. They had a version of it that they had programmed. And that was kind of where the idea for this Space War game originated. Now, heck, it would be kind of fun. That shouldn't be too hard to do. It shouldn't. I was working full time. I had all other things going on, but I thought, that shouldn't be too hard. So within a matter of a couple months, I managed to learn enough 6502 assembler. Although I think by then I probably had done some, and learn how the graphics sprites worked on the Atari and how you would detect collisions and all of that stuff, and managed to write the game. And I don't remember for sure whether I had APX in mind from the get-go or not, but certainly fairly early I realized, maybe I could sell this thing. And the Atari Program Exchange provided an avenue for people to market little games. And so when I had it working, I approached them, and it took a couple revisions back and forth. It was the program was fine. Getting the documentation right and yet have them be happy with it was a little frustrating, but managed to get it done and published the thing, and there it was. I don't think 50 copies sold. It was, it wasn't a very interesting game, but it was kind of fun to do.
I think it's a fun game. I just played it again this morning. I was like, this really is. I was enjoying myself, and playing against the computer AI wasn't bad, and I enjoyed it.
It had AI. I forgot that it had AI. I think it just had random.
Well, then I can be beaten by random movements. Then apparently,
if it had AI, it wasn't very smart. I think that was probably something that APX suggested be put in there. That there be some notion of a way to play with a single player. But
right.
man,
yeah.
I didn't remember doing that.
Yeah, it was it was interesting because there's 2-player mode, and then there was practice mode. I noticed how it was labeled. It was not called 1 player or something. It was just sort of like practice. So, it was one of the later entries into the APX catalog. Actually, it was in the 200s. So it's probably part of the reason it didn't sell a lot.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was in 1983.
Did you make any royalties off of it? Do you remember?
Oh, I think maybe like $50. Not a lot. No.
Yeah.
I don't remember what their payment was. It wasn't a lot. If you sold a whole bunch, you could make some money, but no, it wasn't. It wasn't really. I didn't really do it for that. My friends had fun playing it. I had fun writing it. I didn't play it very much, frankly, other than to test it. So to me, it was a programming exercise more than anything.
Sure. Did you do any other Atari projects?
No, not. I mean, I did other programming stuff, but nothing with APX. Yeah, I had Deep Blue Sea, and I had that C compiler, and I played around with C. I had gotten introduced to the C programming language in 1976, 1977. The University of Wisconsin Computer Systems Lab managed to acquire 6th edition Unix and borrowed a PDP 1145 from the state printing office that they were not using, and managed to get Unix running on it, and I learned C that way. And so then, anytime I got a computer, I was interested in C. I got the BD software C compiler for my Altair and developed a version of Colossal Cave Adventure that I put up on the C users group. And it was funny, about, 10 years later, I see a version of Adventure for free for the PC with, to run it. And I download it and I start it up, and the first thing it says is, please wait a minute while I get my act together. And that told me right there that it had been derived from my old version on the Altair.
Nice. I'm
looking at my source code right now, and I see that, it does have this practice mode thing. Man, I'd completely forgotten about that.
So you still have the source code?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Machine readable and listening, sure.
Will you release it?
Will I release it? I don't know, maybe.
All right.
It would depend on how much effort I had to go through in the release process.
You will have to do no effort except to send it to me or in any format you like, and we'll get it online. And that's the extent of your effort.
Either way, I would have to fire up the Atari simulator and look at it. So I can put it on the to-do list, but it won't happen like in a week or two.
All right. Well,
but I can.
That would be fun.
Certainly add it to my list. Now, I don't have any proprietary interest in the thing. It's just a matter of finding, a couple hours to fire up the Atari emulator, which hopefully will still run under Windows 10, and get it checked out to make sure I find the matching version, right? Because that would be the best.
Sure. Well, that would be nice. Yeah. A side benefit of doing these interviews is I get to ask people about source code. And a couple weeks ago, I talked to Bob Poland, who did Blue Max, and he's like, "Yeah, the source code, here it is." So now we've got that. So it was fun.
In that regard, I collect computers of all sorts, and I have a PDP-11 with a VT-11 graphics emulator, graphics card set, which is a vector graphics thing. So, it might be perfect for doing asteroids, and a GT40. And when I got that VT-11, and they both program the same, when I got that VT-11, I remembered that there had been this lunar lander program that had run on PDP on the GT40 graphics PDP-11 at the University of Wisconsin. They used to show it off during their engineering fair that they held and still hold every other year. And so I went about trying to find where I could get this thing, and it was a really interesting process. A good friend of mine knew the people at the Computer History Museum, and that was when they were out in Boston. And they didn't have the source code, but they had the email address of the guy who had written the source code. And so I managed to, and I would have to go look and see who that was. I've forgotten the name, which I'm a little ashamed of. Anyway, I got a hold of him, and he sent me a couple of tapes that had that code on it, and I got them and managed to read them in. And in the process, I learned that the tapes had actually been written by one Al Coso, who went to school at UWM and then went to work for Apple, and he is now one of the archivists at the Computer History Museum. and he runs bitsavers.org. He started that effort up, which has got all this old PDFs of just an enormous, it's like 20 gig worth, if not more, of PDFs of computer manuals. So I followed this interesting route and did get Lunar Lander to run, which was kind of fun.
Nice. I found, did you do an Atari game called Zeta Affair?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Well, the internet says maybe you did, so internet is wrong.
Yeah, if the internet thinks that, the internet is wrong. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess why was Space War the only thing that you released for the Atari? Did you get interested in other things, or what?
Yeah, right. Let's see, that was in '83. by '86, I had a kind of career change at work and got a lot more busy. Well, even then, even around this time, the PC was coming out, and I got real busy at work being involved in the first rollout of PCs, and I did a study of whether or not the IBM VM operating system, virtual machine operating system, would be applicable to our environment. Eventually, we decided not. But I just got busy with other stuff. Things change.
Sure, absolutely. Let's see. Are you any relation to Robert Jaeger, who did Montezuma's Revenge?
No, not at all. Not as far as I know. I mean, who knows? You go into Ancestry and you find out that he's third cousin or something. But
right.
No, not as far as I know.
Okay. All right. So what do you do today?
What do I do today? I'm retired. I spent 36 years doing IT, everything from IBM 360 to PCs, to Unix, to VAXs, to PDP-11s, to WebSphere application server, the Java Enterprise Edition stuff. So I did it was always something new to work on. And finally, it became time to retire. And so now what I do is I've got my collection of old machines to try and keep running, and they do amazingly well. I've got a PDP 1120 that I got from the University of Wisconsin for nothing. They needed to get rid of the stuff, and they didn't want it anymore. And they got in touch with me, and we backed a truck up and hauled quite a lot of stuff out, which was actually doing them a favor. They were going to have to pay to have it hauled away. Right.
Sounds like one of the situations where you both think the other one is doing them a favor, right?
Right. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
And as I get older, I think they were right, but because eventually I would figure out, okay, now I have to find a home for it. But that machine has a 64K word fixed disk that still works. PDP 1120 still works, still runs the operating system. I can still run the operating system that it had on it the day that they got it. I was an electrical engineer by education for an undergrad, and I still have a lot of interest in that. The guy who was my advisor when I was an electrical engineering student, Charles Keim, was co-author of books on digital logic that are still used in university courses today. And I essentially went back and retook the course on computer design. And when I had done that, we had designed a 12-bit computer. We actually had a little display screen on it that was vector-based, and we had a hangman game that ran on that for our demonstration. We were the only team that had anything like that, because we wrote an interpreter and an assembler, so we had a way to write software and test it. We were the only group that had any of that stuff. And plus, we had a computer that worked. Mm-hmm. And I still have that design. And one of the things I did last summer was to take that design and code it in VHDL, which is a language you use to express digital logic designs that can then be analyzed and programmed into field programmable gate arrays, and brought our old machine back to life. So I do that sort of thing, and I'm looking at doing that now with commercial machines, with doing it with commercial computer designs to try to bring some of them back to life.
Nice.
And that, and just traveling and what retired people do.
Sure. Nice. So what haven't I asked you about the Atari days that I should have?
Well, I mean, machines weren't 100% reliable. I became the fix-it guy. Of course, I had a background in electronics, so when one of those machines would get cranky, Jay, can you take a look at it? Which usually meant taking the thing all apart, and the contacts were tinned. They weren't gold on a lot of the connectors, and they did tend to get cranky. So you'd take the thing all apart and put it back together, and then it would be fine for another 9 months to a year or so, and then it would fail again, and they'd be back with the. I would fix it yet again. we had quite a competition going on with Star Raiders. The people would come in and say, I got, whatever score and whatever level. I remember you got these reward levels. And then, of course, that motivated everybody to play a lot more and best that level.
Yeah. I bet that happened in a lot of places.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. It was a crazy popular game. Cool. Well, if you could send a message to the people who played, the 50 people who played your Space War game back in the day, and the hundreds who pirated it, what would you tell them?
Well, if they pirated it, that was fine with me. I was no fan of Bill Gates and his position on Microsoft Basic. I was one of the, thousands, if not millions, well, thousands, I suppose, that would have liked to have played around with that, but there was no way they could afford it. I was happy to get a few royalties, but it really didn't matter to me. So if people managed to copy it, that was fine. I just hope they had fun, and I hope that maybe they looked a little bit into the history. Yeah, I see it was The Legend of Space War, Creative Computing, 1981 was the article that kind of gave me the inspiration to bother to write the thing. It didn't take me 2 years to write it. I think I just had the article around and then one day went back and reread it. Mm-hmm. So if they learned a little bit about the history of Space War and the history of PDP-1 and by going and reading the Compute article and had fun playing the game, hey, that's great.
Good. Awesome. Thank you for your time today, Jay.
Oh, sure. Have a good day.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.